Hi, this is Anna, and this is Check It at the Round Table, where we discuss movies, books, music, and stuff. Today we are discussing the Thai BL drama series My Romance Scammer. So this series started to air on February 1st of this year. I think it's in its last week coming up here next Monday. And I've been watching this as it's an ongoing series on YouTube. I think Rick Orange channel has a playlist of it. You can also access it through GMMTV depending on which country you're in. Some countries you can, some countries you can't. I'm not sure why. If you have a VPN, I have noticed if you send it to Albania, it gets you a lot more BL dramas than you can in other places. I don't know why, but just a little tip there for those who are struggling in accessing this drama. But anyway, this drama follows two couples. It follows Tim and Pi and Yu and North as they develop feelings for each other, get married, find out that there were some things that were maybe not what they seemed, and get divorced and try to figure out if they want to end up dating again and marrying again and whatnot. So I saw the preview for this when it came out here about a year, maybe 2 years ago now. I honestly can't remember. And I was kind of curious about it because even though I hadn't seen Panashai or Jiratunanan in other shows like Tin Miners, I had seen clips of them. And I really liked their acting. They were just kind of a couple of goofballs. And I thought, I'm going to give this show a try, even though I do not like the premise of it because Anna really values honesty in everything. So dishonesty in a relationship is a big flag for me. I'm going, it's more comedic, I think, than like something that's of serious nature when I was watching the preview. Also, this does have Itawat in it as well, who plays you. I believe he's the same actor who was in Until We Meet Again as Korn. I could be wrong because it's been a little fuzzy, and I've been out of BL dramas and reviewing them for a while because I've been working a lot this past year and didn't have a lot of time for that. So I'm just getting back into this, so pardon my inaccuracies if there are some. I do apologize. So anyway, we open up the drama with Tim and Pi. They're the most predominant couple, I would say, in the series, although they do give ample airtime to North and Yu. Overall, I would say Tim and Pi seem to have a good relationship on the surface. They tend to get along well with each other. They had a kind of cute meet cute, if you will, at a mall. That kind of thing. Very stable seeming couple. As the story progresses, though, you find out that Tim is a scammer who started dating Pi because he knew he was the son of like a mogul in Thailand that owned malls and a bunch of other stuff. And so he's been dating Pi, going to marry Pi, and then he plans to divorce him and get half his possessions. That's his plan. That's his goal. So when you find this out about Tim, you're going, you're not a very likable chap. So I'm just saying that's a big spoiler alert, but yeah. So we have Tim who is out to date Pi, marry Pi, and then divorce him and then take half his stuff. Now, I do think it's interesting in this drama, and I'm not sure about Thai marriage laws and divorce laws, because, like, for example, in other countries like Taiwan, if there's a couple and they get married, they can decide when they get married if they want to divide their possessions half and half with one another or if they want to keep individual accounts. They can, of course, have like a joint account for other situations, but it does eliminate this whole divorce take half your stuff thing. So I'm like, I do like Taiwanese setup that they allow for couples to divide up possessions before to decide if they're going to divide up possessions if something should happen in a divorce later on when they get married. It's like they have this conversation when they're filling out the marriage certificate. Whereas like in the US where I grew up, they do have like people take half the stuff and they have these big arguments and fights and legal dramas and whatnot with the divorce. And it's like, just makes it really uncomfortable. And I think it's one reason why a lot of millennials, when we grew up and saw this hullabaloo, we just decided we weren't really that interested in getting married. You know, it's like, yeah, if it goes wrong, it could be really messy. Whereas, like in other countries, sometimes it's not that big of a deal. It's like, well, in Taiwan, they have you check a box. There you go. It's nice. I like Taiwan. One of the many things I like about Taiwan. But anyway, moving forward. So in Thailand, I guess, according to this drama series, if a couple divorces, then the spouses split up things 50-50. Now, it is also interesting to note that a lot of the Thai BL dramas lately have been kind of promoting marriage and wedding and whatnot. I think the reason is it was last year or the year before, Thailand had marriage available for same-sex couples, made a big move forward with the LGBTQI plus balance here. So I think it's a good thing overall that they have been able to promote that in the dramas, etc. Um, just a nice aspect. Although I will say there's been a lot more weddings in BL dramas, and I'm like, that's good on one hand. I'm glad in Thailand they can get married now legally, etc. But again, I'm going. Some of us, it's like it's not a fairy tale thing. It's like if you get married, it's not like oh it all ends there. It's like oh the journey continues. So anyway, as this drama very aptly points out, so Pi and Tim and you and North, um, Tim and you are both scammers. Now I do want to put a caveat here, which I think some people may have not been discussing in depth when I've been looking at some of the comments. And again, it's not extensive because of my past with the work and whatnot. But it's like everyone was saying, oh, they're both scammers. They're both, bad guys. And I'm going, I don't think it's quite the same thing between the two characters because it involves intent. So for Tim, he went out specifically and dated North so that he could date him, then marry him, then divorce him and get half his stuff. I mean, there's a lot of intention going on with Tim. It's like he had a plan from day one. Now, with you, I don't mean it bad about you, but he was not the sharpest tool in the shed, okay? I mean, that's a nice way of putting it. And he was a scammer before. I am not demoting that his past, okay? And his mom was like a scammer extraordinaire. So I'm like, he comes from a line of scammers, at least as far back as his mother. I don't know past that. But with you, it's like he didn't intentionally go out after North. He went out hiking because he thought that would put him around rich people who like hiking. And I'm going, rich people like a lot of things, but I don't really see them as the hikers of the universe. So I'm not sure why you thought this was a great plan for him to meet the wealthy person who he would end up with. But anyway, Yu goes out hiking. He ends up meeting North, who is out hiking because he's mad that his boyfriend broke up with him, who Pi warned him about. And he meets you. He likes you. They spend a night in the wilderness together, and then he hunts you down and gives him a check for like a god awful amount of money, and says, "If you marry me, you can have this check. I would like to start our lives together now." Now, in my opinion, this puts you on another playing field compared to Pi. So you does take the check. I will fully acknowledge that. Okay, you does marry North. Okay, fully acknowledging he does this, but North knows that he is giving you a check. North knows that he is basically agreeing to marry you for a price. So I know North is stupid too, so I'm not denoting that either. And it's not too bad to the characters, like they just don't have a lot going on with their thought process here. But I'm just saying, North is aware that you is marrying him for the money. And Yu is aware that he is marrying North for the money, but he is not like, when he said it, he's not like, I'm going to try to get North to give me all this money. No, it's like North just does this and then Yu accepts it. Now, in the drama, they try to promote it as like you is scamming North, and I really don't feel it's the same situation between the two characters of Pi and Tim and you and North. I mean, it's different situations, it's different levels. And yes, you does lie to North about his mother. He lies to North about his house, but I would say that's something that could happen in a actual relationship if you had a really crazy mom and a really bad background. I can see people doing that, and not because they're scammers, simply because they really don't want people to have to deal with that whole milieu, as it were. Now, I'm not saying that makes Yu's behavior right or honest or good. Not at all. But I am saying I can understand Yu's behavior far more than I am able to accept Tim's behavior, as it were. Now, after a while, North and you break up. Uh, North gets you to give him a divorce, but they still stay together because they do like one another. And despite North trying to be mad at you and say he's a scammer, he's not really able to buy it. And I do think in this case it makes some sense logically because it's not like you did terrible things to North, like to hurt him or to cause him harm, in the same way that Tim did to Pi in the scamming situation. Now, on the other hand, we have Pi and Tim, and they are going to get married. They have their wedding. At the wedding, it is found out that all these women who Tim was like sugar baby too. I don't know what the right term is for this. But anyway, it's like he would go and hang out with these girls and they would pay him. There was no like physical relation going on with this, but I'm sure that that was something those women probably wanted and didn't get. But anyway, they paid him like 10 million baht, which is a lot of money. I'm not quite sure how much that is, but I'm going, that's a lot of money. So anyway, there's like three girls or three women who are older who Tim was hanging out with as their supposed boyfriend, and they all found out that he had each of them separately, and he was using that money to fund his life with Pi to make it look like he had more money. So they come marching into his wedding after he had broken up with them. One of them found out that this is what was going on. She talked to the other ladies, women, whatever you would say. They come marching into his wedding. I think they punched him. Pai is completely devastated. All the elite of Bangkok are there, and it's just a mess. So after that, the grandpa of the family, who throughout the film has been nothing but a piece of work. Yeah, I'm like he's just a mess. But anyway, the grandpa's like the mogul of the family, and he thinks that he should be able to boss everyone around. I'm like, I don't know what it feels like to be a grandpa, but I can guarantee that if I was a grandmother, I would find far better things to do with my time than boss around my grown grandkids. I'm like, you know, I don't know. Go take up badminton or, something. I don't know. But anyway, the grandpa disowns North. He disowns Pi. He sends them away without even anything from their condos. And he's like, I'm embarrassed and ashamed of you. You have no money. You have nothing. And he forbids their parents from talking to them. Now, with North, his parents are already gone. With Pi, his parents are just kind of weak and sad, I think is the best way to describe them. I'm like, if my kid had been scammed in his wedding, I would be like, I'm so sorry, honey. We will figure this out. And your grandpa can go, take up badminton, but we're not going to listen to him on this deal. I don't know. I'm like, maybe it's the Midwesterner in me, but I'm like, that just isn't okay. So anyway, they end up all back at Pi's house. Now, a bit of a backstory on Pi. Oh no, not Pi's house. They all end up back at Tim's house. So a bit of backstory on Tim is he did have a house that was his parents' because his parents had somehow come into money through a business. They had built a dream house. He lived there with them. Then something went wrong in the business. They ended up having to escape to China because they had done something that wasn't quite okay with their business. and they left Tim by himself in with the house, and that's that part of the story. Now, I will say it is sad that Tim had that happen. I mean, no child should walk in and find himself abandoned at any age, whether he's in high school, whether he's in early college, whether he's an adult, whether he's not. I'm like, that is just something that should not happen. However, I don't think it is enough of an excuse to say it's okay what he did with the three women, or what he did with Pi and his plans to take half his possessions and divorce him. I'm like, it doesn't excuse Tim's motivation. I mean, it explains a little bit of like what maybe nudged him in the wrong direction, but it doesn't give the viewers like a comfortable excuse for his bad behavior. I'm like, it really doesn't for Tim. And it's nothing against the actor who plays Tim, because I really do like the actor who plays Tim. He does a good job in this show. He did a good job in Tin Miners from what I've seen of the clips. So this is nothing against that particular actor. It's just against that character. I'm going, his backstory does not explain his problematic behavior as an individual toward the person who he's even supposed to love most in the world. And that's coming from someone who is very unromantical. But I'm like, this just this dog don't hunt, son. So anyway, Pi and Tim and North and you all end up back at Tim's house because he has a house. It's one of the few things he has left because he ended up paying the women who he had been taking money from a good settlement. And he had his car left and his house left, and that was kind of it. And I think like 15 baht or whatever. So that's where they were a few episodes ago. Now, over the course of time, North and Yu have continued to build their relationship. They're now working back for Grandpa at the Empire. They also figured out how to manage the bakery with Pai's help and with a bit of help from Tim. Tim did in the last few episodes, like I think in the previous episode before this one and the episode before that, so like the last three episodes, he has been upping his game slightly to make him a little less dislikable, but I still don't really feel that he's a very decent human at this point. And I'm like, you know, North and you are both, as I said before, they're not very sensible or smart. That's not their strong suit. They have other strong suits, like they care a lot for one another. They try to be there for one another in their own weird and unusual ways. But I'm like, you know, they're understandable in how they came together because even though you did was a scammer in the past, he wasn't like a terrible scammer with North, except for like lying about his mom and his house. But again, that I do not feel is completely ununderstandable given his past history. Now with Tim, when things break up with Pi is devastated because the person who he has cared for, who he thought he spent his life with, had his kids with, turned out to be a complete and unequivocal liar. So that made it hard for Pi to deal with. And I think for Pi, the thing that's interesting with him is Pi is a very caring and thoughtful person, meticulous to the nth degree, in some ways too much so, perhaps. But he tries very, very hard to do all he can to take care of the people that he cares about, to take care of his situation and make sure that he's being responsible. So in every case, Pi is trying very, very hard. And then he finds out, like with Tim, that everything he thought was true there is not true at all. And then he finds out, you know, that he's Tim's been having the girlfriends. And I will say, like with the one thing that really isn't addressed that I think ought to be addressed by Tim in this situation is like when everything busts up, Tim tries to come and fix it with Pi, but he doesn't like sit down and talk with Pi. He doesn't say like, even though I was seeing these two women, I was just seeing them for the money. I wasn't having, you know, a relationship with them. I'm like, things like that I think should have been discussed a little bit in this series because as it stands, if someone were in Pie's shoes, they'd be sitting there going, my boyfriend not only or my husband, my fiance, my husband, not only, you know, lied to me, tried to take my money, but he was seeing three women in addition to me. I'm like, that would be a hurdle that I think needs more discourse in the series, just from a logical standpoint. I'm like, I'm not saying that the scamming isn't bad in and of itself, but the possibility of, I don't know, neglect and just outright confusion that happens with that situation, I really think should have deserved more airtime. Maybe we'll get it in the last few episodes. I don't know. But I'm like, poor Pie. He thinks it's just a scurvy knave. I'm like, Tim is just a scurvy knave. That's the only thing I can really compare it to. I'm like the pirate. He's just a pirate. But he's not as bad as a pirate as Pie probably thinks he is. But again, he's not really explaining that aspect of himself. And like when he does talk to Pi about the situation, he says things that honestly, from a logical standpoint, are downright kind of stupid. Like he says, Sandor, well, Tim was a great guy. He's a great character. He's like a unicorn in that he's what everyone probably wants and no one can ever have because there's nobody really like that in real life. And I'm sitting there going, I don't mean it bad, but that's not really the best way to kind of have a roundabout apology about lying to someone for so many years and marrying them for false pretenses. I'm like sitting there going, well, the person that you fell in love with was great, but they don't really exist and nobody's really like that. So, oh well. I'm like, I don't know. It just didn't set well with Anna as I was watching this. I'm like, I think, maybe just a good old-fashioned apology and explanation for why you were such a rogue and a thief and a brigand might be better than sitting there and trying to say that no one really exists like the person that you tried to pretend to be. Now, circling the wagons here, though, so Tim does try to come back into the life of Pi. And Pi, on his part, is very confused. I would also say very vulnerable at this point. So I'm kind of interested to see, like, in the end episode, how are they going to handle this with the characters? Because with with both of us, like Pi is, it's like in the, I think it was the last episode, there's a scene where Pi and Tim are back where they were when they first met. And Pi says, I'm just so angry at you. I'm so mad about what you did. And I really am trying to counter that with the fact that I am completely alone in the world. My grandpa's gone, my parents are gone, nobody gives a hoot and a holler about me. And I am still glad when I turn around you are there because I've just come to always expect you to be there because you were my partner, you were my spouse, and now everything's fallen apart and I don't know how to handle it, but I cannot quit being very, very angry at you. And I'm like, you know, I do kind of understand that kind of thing because it's like he really did fall in love with who he thought that was as a person, but it's a facade. It's not really who that person truly was. Now, the thing I think is a little tricky with this whole situation, though, is how much of Tim is really who Pi likes. Like, when we think about people, we think about their personality, their interests, their minds, how they process things as being who they are, along with their appearance. But with Tim, it's like he's not really the person who Pi fell in love with. Pi fell in love with an illusion that happened to be housed in that body. But it doesn't make Tim the person who he fell in love with. It just makes him the the mastermind behind that creation. And so it leads to kind of a confusing milieu as it were, with Pi having to discern like who does he truly love? What does he truly want out of life? And it kind of reminds me of like when I was on, I think it was like on YouTube. recently. There was like a couple of news articles about people with their AI girlfriends or boyfriends. And it's not that there's anything necessarily inherently bad about that. So I'm not here to like get on an expounding blank about whether AI is good or bad for relationships. But I do think it leads to a similar situation as you see in this drama series between Pi and Tim. Because like with the AI boyfriends and girlfriends that people have, and I think the two examples I was watching like a news report on was one guy had made like a chat GPT girlfriend he named Jennifer, and the other lady had like a replica boyfriend. I'm not sure what replica is, but anyway. And so they feel like these creations are their romantic partners. And I'm not here to say whether or whether not that is true because I'm like, there's a lot of things that we have to sit there and go are existential ideas and they're too big and lofty for Anna to deal with. But my point is here is that in the same way that they believe that GPT or replica AI boyfriend or girlfriends are their partners, it's kind of the same situation with Pi and Tim in that Pi has invested his life, his love, his care into what he thought was his person of Tim. But what he thought was Tim was just a pre programmed illusion that Tim generated. And it leads to a confusing problem of who really does Pi love? Or does Pi really even love anyone at all because of the situation that has happened, which I think would be, as a human, especially a human like Pi, who feels things deeply but has a very hard time expressing it, would be very devastating because people like Pi, it's kind of unusual for them to even be in a relationship, to be honest. And this isn't to be bad to Pi's character at all, but they're very introverted, they're very independent, they don't want to have to rely on other people. So the fact that someone like Pi even trusted someone in the first place is it's big news. I'm like, really, big news. And then to have this happen to Pi, I'm like, it's no wonder he's confused and muddled and stressed and very, very angry. And with Tim, it's like I think a lot of people want to excuse Tim to say that his past is the reason he became who he was and that we should all just believe in happy endings. But with Tim, I think it's a little more confusing. And the other part about Tim is now he has no motivation with money with Pi because Pi has no money, Pi has no, whatnot. Now he is getting back his condo, so some people could argue that in the future there's a chance that Tim could get some of Pi's money as Grandpa relinquishes his grip on stuff. But I really don't think even if Pi ends up back with Tim, he is ever going to let Tim have his stuff or his money or any of that because I'm like, after what Tim did, I'm sure there would be an ironclad prenup involved, I would imagine, to make sure that such a thing never happened again. Now, you would hope that someone like Tim would be a reformed person, that they would never try to do something like that again. But I also think it's human nature to sit there and go, let's just bar that thought and make sure there's a prenup when someone gets married next time. I'm just saying. So I don't know how this is all going to work out with the characters. Now, I will say this series, the My Romance Scammer, and then I also did watch Head to Head here recently. These are both by GMM TV. I think it's GMM TV Mini Studio now. I'm not sure what they're calling. It's a special name. But these productions are not, in Anna's opinion, the same kind of quality productions we saw a few years ago, like with Bad Buddy, for example, or, you know, Same Home recently, or vice versa, or Our Sky Tree. It's not the same quality of production. Now, the actors are doing a great job in these series. I really do think they are, but the writing quality of the plot, like especially like when I was watching Head to Head, I'm used to following complicated plots, but that one just had way too many holes going on. But- And I was sitting there going, they really should have read this a little better, I think, before they released this in the order that they did, because the back and forth of like the past and future selves and the other reality selves, it just didn't blend well, in honest personal opinion. In the same way, this series relies heavily on like slapstick humor and kind of like really cheesy romantic cliches at times. I'm not saying that for some people they won't enjoy that or relate to that, but it seems a little less mature, not in mature in an inappropriate way, but in a developed and responsible way than what I'm used to seeing from GMMTV. Now, maybe they did this to appeal to younger audiences or because they thought it would be a cute factor or something that Anna doesn't know relating to the current BL drama market in Thailand. But since most of the foreign market who watches these shows outside of Thailand tends to be um, adults, I think it's kind of weird that we made it for kind of like a kid type comedy with the slapstick humor and just some of the off back and forth that goes on. Now, I would give the series so far probably a 6 out of 10. I do like the character of Pi. I think that he develops well in the series. I think he shows well the difficulty of trying to find balance in what he's going through. I also think that New North and New are kind of a cute couple, although sometimes they just become too slapsticky for me. I'm like, I don't know how to explain that another way, but really just too slapsticky. So it's also kind of interesting to see how they use the same actors in GMMTV in different shows. Like I was watching this one, and the aunt is from another series that I recently watched, and it's just kind of funny to see how they just stick these GMMTV actors in all these different series. It's like, oh, he was in this or she was in that and they were in that. So it's kind of cool to see that in a way. The other thing is the music in this series is kind of interesting, and they also use different filming locations than they typically do. Like I think they use some smaller malls in the outskirts of Bangkok, like um, just not terribly familiar places. Like normally they shoot at more iconic locations. This one, I think they shot some of it at like Charnathy Avenue, which is, if I recall, like a smaller, almost like outdoor courtyard type mall near Chiang Wat Station. So it's like it's more eclectic in its mix of what they did for locations, and I think that's probably more emblematic of the smaller studio that they're working with for GMMTV. I'm again not sure, I'm not an expert on that, but just guessing here. And I do look forward to seeing how the final episodes play out. I think we have one left, maybe two, but I think it's just one. I'm hoping that they're somehow able to pull this together, but I kind of have a feeling they're just gonna kind of mash it up at the end and think we all will just believe it's a happy ending. And honestly, I don't think it works that way. So anyway, we'll keep our fingers crossed and hope it turns out okay. And that is my review of My Romance Scanner series up to the final episode here that's going to be airing next Monday, I think. Check it at the round table. Bye.